So this is Logan Rozek interviewing Max Morgan on May 5th, 2025. Gonna jump in here. It's kind of a baseline. Where were you born?
So I was born in San Francisco on January 19th, 1988, but raised in Los Angeles. My family moved there when I was 2. So.
All right. And how long have you lived in Davis?
In September, it will be 12 years. There was a 6-month gap, but pretty much 12 years.
How'd you get to Davis?
I came to Davis to finish my undergraduate degree. I was studying chemistry and got my Bachelor of Science here, and then decided I like this town and stayed.
And so what is the night market and how does it operate?
It's interesting. I think it's different things to different people. To me, I would say it is a community organization where we gather edible food that would have been thrown away and bring it to Central Park to give it away, no questions asked. But I almost say like the food is a carrot, and the whole thing that we're trying to do is build community using food. Because I would say a lot of people that come there, especially coming from the food, are coming for social interaction too.
And I guess
I can get into the logistics too if you want.
Yeah, I mean, what sort of like social interaction are you hoping to bring out through the food?
I can say this, we've used the term often. There's a night market as a third space. So it's a place outside of your home, outside of your work, that you can go to interact with people. You can go further because we operate from 9 to 11. There are not really a lot of free spaces that can have all kinds of demographics come, especially free spaces that are substance free. So we can get people who are homeless, people who have families, students, and to have them all interact, that's pretty rare. So we really strive for this organic, at least for me, that's a big goal, this organic interaction with diverse communities that don't really occur. Because I can look like, okay, if you have money, and someone will say, oh, why don't you care about the issue of homelessness? You don't know anyone who's homeless. You've never formed relations. You never talked to anyone. Why would you give a shit?
Yeah.
Which I know that answers some of the other stuff too, but I can get more into that later as well.
Yeah, I mean, I might see. This will jump.
Yeah, I saw you had the question about who comes, and now you get why I say the who comes.
Yes.
It's literally everyone. People are like, what do you mean everyone? I'm like, no, we want, if you have money, come. Interact with people who don't. This is really valuable because we only have, I can look at this, I can look at the numbers. So YOLO Food Bank, at least according to their metrics, donates around 10 million pounds of food a year. We, if we really wanted to look at it, might do 80,000. It's nothing. Doesn't mean we're not helping, but it's more to say we can't solve food insecurity. For me, the bigger issue is we want to solve the stigma, because a lot of people are too embarrassed to get it, and we want to help promote these interactions. So that's why I can get into the logistics of how we operate too, in terms of how we pick up food and all that other stuff, but slightly different.
Sure, I think maybe just, I do want to get this in. So how did you get involved with the night market?
I can do that too. I knew one of the co-founders whose name was Ernst Bertone, and he was involved with the Frege. Do you know about the Frege organization at all? Or
I don't think I do. If that's
no, I'll fill that in.
If that's background, go for it.
It's important background. So the Frege, it's a community refrigerator organization, which is a nonprofit, which is a global nonprofit. So they try to promote community refrigerators all across the world. So even Slovakia, they promoted a community refrigerator. Brazil, Israel, everywhere. He started the org and then made a bunch in Davis. And I knew about the org. I'd actually used it myself before I even met him. Then met him at a party, and I added him on Facebook, and he sent me an invite for this thing called Night Market, and I looked at what it was. I'm like, I want in on this on the ground floor, because this notion of trying to create this warm, welcoming space to give food away, I'm like, this is really unique and really special.
And this was right at the beginning.
So I could say, I don't know if I went to the first one or the second one, but it was one of the first two. It probably was the first, but I would not put money on that.
Okay. What year was this?
2019. So this was the last week of May 2019. And Tuesday we had our first one. We were originally only on Tuesdays, and it was super small. It was just, I think we got at that time only 2 different pickups, and it was just a couple of people sitting by benches, and it grew by the fall. We had someone who was really actively promoting, and we had 40, 50 people waiting for food.
And I guess a little bit more background. What conditions prompted the creation of the night market specifically?
So this, I have to say, other people probably know a little bit more than me. I can give what I know on this. Ernst himself had 2 friends. One's name was Evan Dumas, who was the president of Food Recovery Network, and another person's name was Dima Tamimi, who is a local kind of serial entrepreneur and has a nonprofit called Food and Ladle, and they were having coffee and mishkas discussing the issue of edible food waste in Davis and what to do about it. And this kind of came up as a potential solution. And Evan and Dima, I think Evan may have helped with some of the first couple recoveries, but Dima more just was a huge supporter. And then Ernst brought on 2 other people. One's name was Valerie Wenborn, and the other was Helena Chow, who helped start this. And then I came along pretty soon, and a couple other people.
Okay, cool. And then I guess maybe one of the first logistical ones is, I know that restaurants and grocery stores have a reputation for not wanting to, give away things that they can sell for free. What did the night market do to convince these suppliers to provide food?
So I know at least I can talk about the 2 original suppliers. The 2 original suppliers were Upper Crust and Chickpeas. Chickpeas they got because they were randomly emailing a bunch of restaurants, and Chickpeas was the only person who responded. So why they decided to respond to their particular pitch, I don't know. It says a lot about them in a good way. Upper Crust, Ernst had a housemate that worked there, so that was a way in. So what I've learned often in terms of getting food, having these connections makes a very big difference. So for example, we had a volunteer who worked at Pete's, and he helped us get donations from Pete's, which we still get. And then he talked to Noah's Bagels that was right across and got donations from Noah's Bagels. So it's a pretty common thing.
And then kind of starting early on, 2019, 2020, pre-pandemic definitely. What does a normal night look like? Or what did a normal night look like?
So that's why I can say it's a little weird because there have been many different phases. I call it like the super early phase where it's just a couple of people sitting by chairs, hanging out. There's really almost no knowledge that it's existing. By the summer, it kind of got into more of a party atmosphere. By fall, we could get a lot of people over there. We could easily probably have 40, 50 people hanging out. And a lot of the atmosphere started to peter out as we got closer and closer to COVID. And then by the time COVID happened, things changed dramatically. So as that's just like there's been all these different versions depending upon a lot of outside influences. Yeah, that's why I'm saying normal night. And I could say this, we went from 1 night a week to 2 nights in January of 2020. I was pushing very hard to try to grow slowly because I realized this is the kind of thing that can lead to burnout very easily. So I'm like, we'll grow with an overabundance of volunteers, which is what had happened.
Why do you say that this thing could burn out quickly?
You have both the logistics that you have to take care of, which takes a mental strain, and you have emotional potential things. Is if you do this, people come and tell you some very intense things, and you may have to deal with a lot of different personalities. That's can burn you out. And I think it's a common, I don't know how many other mental aid orgs I've talked to a bunch. Burnout's a huge problem. We operate now 5 days a week, so I was like, it's a lot.
How long did it take you to get up to 5 days a week?
That's a wonderful question. So I can say there were other members of the org that wanted to really push us to grow. I was in many ways the gatekeeper. And then when you ask this question about 2020, I could tell you that once COVID hit, and especially the early days of COVID where people had not gotten government assistance, we started to do Monday, which I began, and then a couple months later we started Wednesday. So it was much faster than normally would have happened, but the outside world was kind of pressuring us into other ways too. So for example, Co-op at that time was adjusting their ordering, and or the Davis Food Co-op, so we would sometimes got 120 pounds of food a night from them. That was really high quality food, so. And sorry if this stuff is a little all over the place too.
No, that's fine. This is kind of how people reconstruct things. Let's see.
Like you have a question about changes during COVID, and I can get into that explicitly if you want.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So so I think as you can get, we went from kind of a more party atmosphere, people going out there. We had a woman named Anya who was an epidemiologist, and once a lot of COVID stuff was really hitting the fan, like I said, we started to cut back on a little bit of things. Like we asked people to have some social distance starting in early March. By mid-March, when the world's shutting down, we didn't stop doing a night market, but we instituted a policy of only having 2 people there at once, having people social distance, and pretty much get food and leave, which was a very different philosophy than, as you can tell, it was in the beginning and as it is now.
Yeah. When did it start to return from the kind of just food production to the kind of community connections that it is?
So there was a little bit of that was happening with some of the people involved. It was a bit of a tension point of like how to try to navigate this COVID notion of like we're telling people necessarily at one point not to really gather, and then some people may do it. But I would say full on, probably in about like 2021. I'd say for about a year we were pretty strict in terms of COVID restrictions. Some people even stricter than others. So that's part of the reason it's a relatively flat organization. So even though, yes, I've been there the longest, I have a strong say, even at the time when other people may have been there longer, everyone kind of found their own ways to navigate this within certain boundaries.
Okay. And so you have we've kind of covered the early period, we've kind of covered the COVID period, and that ends like 2021. Are there any changes that take place between like 2021 and now?
So turnover, because I could say, just like any organization will be transparent, you can have disagreements. Sometimes some people leave, things can change. And in terms of Davis also, you're constantly getting new people. So I think now, besides me, there are not a lot of other people who have been with Night Market. I think the longest other one is from 2021. So like, for example, Ernst, he moved back to Brazil in January 2021. He actually married the one woman, Valerie, so they both left.
Oh, okay.
And it's like there was the woman, Anya, who had moved back to Spain last year. You have other people who have left for all kinds of reasons. The woman, Helena, during COVID, went back home to Texas and then never really got back involved. And you have students who graduate all the time. So I can say at least there's a little bit less change now because I've made a stronger push to get more community members as volunteers, because that's going to be a much more consistent situation.
So you're talking like community members
versus students.
Okay.
It's like we still have a lot of students, and we always will. But when you just have students, your turnover is going to be insane.
What do you do to bring on community members? How do you find and get them to
They
stay?
often find us. So I can give an example. So like tonight, there's a family that actually lives in West Sacramento. Their names are Aaron, Sierra, and Grace, and they all volunteer together. The daughter started volunteering when she was 10. She's like, I want to volunteer. So like, and they asked, can we bring her daughter to volunteer? It's like, as long as you're there, that's fine. And they're there pretty much every Monday, and they're not going anywhere. We have another one named Nancy, who is 75, who's part of YOLO DSA. She reached out to us and she's like, I can help out Tuesday. I'll do a bunch of stuff on Tuesday, but that's my one day. So it's like, fantastic, we'll keep you. So a lot of just people reaching out to us. And then friends. So I can say often with both students, actually for students, this really happens. We'll have one student will volunteer, they'll talk to their friends will bring on other friends. So we actually have a huge bumper crop of freshman volunteers right now.
Oh, okay.
And it's a little scattered, but hopefully.
No, scatter is fine. Scatter is great. Yeah, I kind of circle back to this. It was the you mentioned the that you get food from the Davis Food Co-op.
Mm-hmm.
How much coordination is there between the market and the co-op and any other Davis
That is a
organizations?
wonderful question. So I can say, like, it was pretty informal for a while, but it's going to become much more formal over the next probably couple weeks, because I don't know if you've researched SB 1383.
I haven't heard anything about that.
So there was a California Senate bill passed in 2016 trying to eliminate organic matter going to the landfill. And as part of that, it requires what they call tier 1 producers, so that's like grocery stores with more than 10,000 feet, to fulfill certain requirements to be compliant. And one of those is if you give away food, you have additional paperwork you have to do. So it's like a lot of what we do with them, which has been very much, we just pick up the food, is now we go, no, we now need to report what we're getting, have official contracts, and go from there.
And are there any other businesses? Are you able to tell me about any other businesses where you kind of that's in effect?
I would say right now there are only grocery store that's donating that would fall into that. There's a chance that as other requirements roll in and we're told to be compliant, we will be compliant, but we haven't been asked from anyone else yet. So I'll give you an example, like for Upper Crust, I have the manager's number, and he'll often text me, he's like, hey, we have some food. I'm like, all right, I'll stop by.
Okay.
And actually, if you want, I can give you this kind of universe. Like, if they ever make requests, we'll always try to stay by the request. So, for example, for Upper Crust, because they're right by the community refrigerator by the co-op, we had occasionally put bread by that community refrigerator, and they had asked us to please stop doing that because they had some of their customers taking bread there versus going to the market. Like, perfectly reasonable request. We want to do it again, and never had a problem because we dealt with it right away. So that kind of answers your question of how a lot of those relationships work. It's often trying to make it as easy as possible on them, and then as long as the request is within our ability to try to grant it.
Okay.
Which helps deal with this whole trust issue.
Yes.
It's a big one, because one of my biggest goals is I would love to get food from the dining commons. They push back very hard and say, oh, we can't do this for X, Y, and Z reason, and it's often labor costs, and they don't want to say labor costs.
Really?
Because for this Senate bill, the way it works is you have to it's specifically a bill focused on reducing greenhouse gases in landfills. So as long as you can say the food is composted, and because it was tainted, you could say it's your judgment call to say the food is tainted. Then you can compost it and not have to sort it and portion it, which takes much more labor.
Okay.
But they'll say, oh, it's not safe. So you can't really challenge that judgment call, and it's very common.
There's a question there. I'm just trying to figure out what it is.
Yeah, go for it.
Just with the do you think it's fair to say that Davis is it's like a sort of like loophole almost?
And loophole in what sense?
Or just in that if they on like the judgment call.
So I would say this is a bigger thing than Davis. This is throughout all of California. With this bill, is anyone can, once you claim food is tainted, you do not have to donate it. And there's no very clear standards of what should conform to tainted or not.
Gotcha.
So as to say, someone could go, oh, it's tainted, and then put it in compost where you can dump everything into one bin versus having to sort it and then find a proper place to give it. And you can think in terms of labor costs, one's much easier than the other. They don't say that, but I think that that's the quiet part they don't want to say out loud.
That makes sense. Thanks for
Yeah.
explaining that, clarifying that.
No, definitely not a Davis issue. So I don't know if you've ever heard that where caterers will say, oh, we can't donate food. It's like, No, you can definitely donate food, and it's probably not tainted. You probably don't want to take that extra energy to portion it and to find a place to bring it.
Okay. Let's see. With the tainted food and UC Davis, notwithstanding, what are some of the successes that the night markets have?
Like I said, even with UC Davis, we still get a lot of food from them. So I can give a great example that we have. I had made some connections via a Buy Nothing group, and there's this woman named Jessica Caldwell who's a cardiovascular postdoc. So she'll do a conference, and every time she does a conference, she donates all the food to us, and she's convinced other people to do a conference to donate food to us. Like, to me, that's a huge success. It's often built on these personal relationships. We've built a personal relationship with Davis Community Meals. So the guy who runs Dunlop, who's really awesome, his name is Brennan. He has both let us use his walk-in refrigerator to store extra food if we don't have space, and if they had extra food from Davis Community Meals they couldn't donate, literally come in his truck and drop it off to us. So a lot of networking has led to some big success, or in general, just having people reach out to certain restaurants. So like Mochi, Why Not Boba has mochi donuts, and if they have extra mochi donuts, they literally will just bring them over to us. Sophia's is wonderful to give us rice. There are all these places. Upper Crust is really great because if they wanted to give food to the Yellow Food Bank, they'd have to drive there themselves and drive back, which is a significant cost. So they'll message us, we'll pick it up from them, and they don't have to do anything. So a lot of what we'll do with businesses is figure out a way to make their lives easier, and that is a great way to increase donations. Which I think, sadly, not everyone thinks about it that way.
And in addition to kind of establishing these relationships with all these different areas, what changes have you noticed in the community as a result of the market?
That's a wonderful question. So during the 2019-2020 days when people were partying a little harder, homeless people weren't comfortable coming. A lot of them wanted to stay sober, and it was not necessarily a sober environment, and that scared them away. So as the COVID restrictions started, it became that again, and in many ways it stayed that. So there's a whole group of people that didn't used to want to come that now are comfortable coming. And when stuff has ever happened, like occasionally we have to reinstate some of that stuff, but it makes a big difference.
One thing that you mentioned was the food pickups as opposed to delivering food. Are you able to talk a little bit more about, what does a normal food pickup look like for the market?
I can do even better. I can show you.
Okay, awesome.
So, in terms of logistics or in terms of the pickup itself? Because I can do both.
If you do both, that would be awesome.
Okay, so logistics, I can show you our Discord. So, for example,
actually,
or if you want, what would be useful?
Because the point is for this to be all archival.
I can show the Discord on the camera too. If that's useful. Just in the sense of like that gives an idea, because a lot of our communications in terms of like who's getting what will be done there, and interestingly enough, it kind of has become a self-perpetuating mechanism. Where people are like, who's getting this pickup? And someone will respond and say, oh, I'm getting this.
Okay. Do you have a way to just tell me how it works?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
100%.
I think that would be better to.
Oh yeah, no, just whatever works best. Just check it in. So how it works often in terms of a pickup, we have the notion of a night captain. So like for me, I'm the Monday night captain. So my job is really to try to ensure a lot of the pickups on Monday are taking place. Some have higher priority. So like getting upper crust, which can often be 200 pounds of bread, I often do myself. Co-op, we have a volunteer named Anna that often does that. If she can't do it, she'll often message me and I'll find someone else to do it. That one family, Grace, Aaron, and Sierra, they'll often get Village Bakery. And then at the market itself, around 9:30, we'll send some people to get rice. That will be done. We normally would get Chipotle at around 11. It's been a bit different now with the changes in free stuff, which I can get into, but we'll send someone over there to get that. The mochi nut someone will bring to us. I actually have a contact with a person who's affiliated with a church across the street, and let's say they're having a catered event, they have extra food, he'll message me and say, oh, we have extra food, please come over. And actually, even better, if someone gives us food, I'll often ask, like, hey, can we portion your kitchen? So we can often portion in a sanitary commercial kitchen across the street and then bring it across. So a lot of these logistics depends on it, or like for the conferences, I made the contact with Jessica. I would say, I would talk to people like, could you pick this up at this time, bring it here, and it would be done. Or even with her, we'll talk about the logistics of, they had both they had a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I think at that point, we partnered with the Food Recovery Network. The Food Recovery Network took the breakfast and brought it to the pantry. They put the lunch in a refrigerator so we could pick it up later. And then when dinner was over, we came and picked up the dinner in trays and brought it to the church to be portioned.
And could you explain portioning for me?
I can explain that completely. So portioning often implies literally taking what would it be, like a 3x2? Size-wise, 3x2 by about 3 box that's made out of compostable material, and transferring the food from often a large aluminum tray into that box, closing the box and labeling it. The whole idea is if we can do that all in a commercial kitchen, very sanitary, we're good, it's labeled, people know what it is, and then we don't have to worry about doing that outside, potentially just giving people the food right out in front of them.
Okay.
Especially during the summer when it gets hot and we got to worry about roaches. Then we got no worries.
Yeah, I mean, the roaches bring up a whole other thing. Do you often have to kind of worry about other, quote unquote, pests and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if we give food away, we'll raise the food up. We often have little grates. So if we get bread, we'll try to keep it above ground. We'll make sure people are wearing gloves if they're touching it. Often we'll have tongs. If we see occasionally someone might try to reach inside to get bread, and it's like, please don't do this. And then you have to try to balance the notion of how much you want to push this versus potentially alienating people, and there is a judgment call there. It can be hard, where it's like you might talk to someone after and say, hey, please don't do this again, and the thing I would say, and this can happen with people, is if someone's really type A, where they need things super orderly, and this is not the best place for them just because you have all kinds of people coming. You can try your best, but you have to have a lot of grace. That helps, because the food safety stuff is something we do take seriously, and we try our best. Like, it's not a commercial grade kitchen, so not perfect, but we're doing the best we can.
Yeah, a couple things I just wrote down. It was some of the stuff is food that is just like direct produce, and some of this is
bags of bread.
Yeah, bread, but some of it's also like rice, and you get stuff from Chipotle. How much of what you keep is stuff that can be eaten immediately, and how much can be saved?
It's a wonderful question. So like ready-made meals is probably 10 to 15%. I wish it was more, because as you can imagine, especially if you don't have a house, that's much more useful. But it's very difficult to get. So like we can get the rice, which is great, but getting protein ready-made is very hard. Except for example, we get some food from the Dining Commons, which is ready-made. That's actually, if you want to get into the weeds, they make extra food as backup food. They'll donate some of that to Food Recovery Network, and we get some of that from them. So, do you know about Food Recovery Network, or I can gladly explain?
No, go for that, please.
So it's a club on campus. It's a night that's part of the nationwide organization Food Recovery Network. So Sac State has one as well. And their goal is to try to increase the amount of food recovery on campus. So they'll often partner with us and other orgs to help facilitate those goals. So like they do their own portioning too. We get some of it, and some of it will end up at Paul's place.
And then I need to get that. I want to get that question before we got much of this one. But you just talked about kind of balancing acts with like food cleanliness, but also being kind of welcoming for people. how many other balancing acts do you? Because
So many.
it seems like
There's
like
a
you do
lot. There's a lot of balancing. So it's like you even talk about like what's characteristics of a good community. I would say to me, it's like you can be welcoming, but you actually need boundaries too. So we actually had a situation where there was a person who had volunteered for us a little bit. Who was a community member who, at the time he still is unhoused. And about 2 weeks ago, he assaulted another community member, and he left. And it's like the question is like, what? Can he ever come back here? And we'll have to think about that as an organization, where it's like, this is, and I don't want to. We try to be transparent. We're not hiding from this stuff because we get this is something that can happen. But to me, that's a major violation of that space. If he was ever to come back, he'd have to really repent to make this work. Not to say we're going to make that impossible, but we're not going to just roll over.
Okay.
And like I said, for almost anything, where it's like we've had discussions, which make me very proud as it is, on sexual harassment and how to deal with that. Where it's like, this happens everywhere. But we're talking about it, and we're talking about ways to improve it, ways to make people feel comfortable coming forward with it, actively looking out for sexual harassment versus being passive with it. Which I'm like, no, that's a good sign, because most people pretend it doesn't exist. And we're trying to take the exact opposite approach. Because I can say this, we have a lot of volunteers who are college-age women, and the community views us often as a meat market. So I say, how can you balance that? Whereas like they're going to say, oh, there's all these beautiful women you can try to talk to. I was like, that's okay, but we want to try to change the perception of how people feel about that. It's a hard balancing act. And to make the younger women feel comfortable too, and to know that they are safe. So it's like, how do you can't make everyone's needs met. You have to prioritize certain ones.
Yeah, I mean, with that, I mean, how does the, because it is a night market. How does could you elaborate a little bit more on like how it's a night market, but it's also not everyone's comfortable being out at night. Is that something that you've had to grapple with?
I would say yes. So there are volunteers. They're actually, because of me, a wonderful example. There's one named Kina who today will often do earlier pickups. So some of our earliest pickups are for something like Noah's Bagels, which is at 2. Actually, the one person I told you earlier about Nancy, who's 75, also is like, I don't want to stay up that late. I still want to help. So we're like, we'll give you earlier pickups. You can bring them here and leave, or you can bring it to me and do that. So there are ways people can be involved and not physically be at the market. There's also some there's administrative and other tasks people can do too. And the big deal is we've had volunteers that are not comfortable staying up at late at night. And then I'll tell them, it's like, you don't have to be here then. Like there are other, if you want, there's other stuff you can do. I don't know if that's the full answer to your question. I can probably go deeper.
No, I think that answered what I was asking. So, I mean, in terms of like logistics, is there has there? Are let's see. It just. I mean, the organization seems pretty decent. Decentralized.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you able to tell me about any like I don't know if there is any office or any sort of like
so that I can tell you exactly.
Man in the chair type stuff.
There a lot of stuff stays in my apartment. We also there's a fraternity across the street that very graciously lets us use an area underneath their stairwell as a storage. But in terms of like freedom and food, it limits our ability a bit to get certain things because we do not really have a great place to store food over time. In the past, we had occasionally done it on people's houses, but that also creates a logistical issue. People have to get there and back, and that adds an additional burden to volunteers. So I think often having it as decentralized as possible in many ways makes everyone's life easier. Whereas like if we can't get the food, it's okay.
When did that fraternity start offering their
Well, actually, I can say that story exactly. So it happened, I think, in 2023. We have a former volunteer named Felix, who actually right now is in France. And he was interesting one where he didn't fly to France. He did a train cross country and then took a boat to get to France.
Wow.
So I'd say it's like, if you usually volunteer with us for a while, you're probably an eccentric. Like, who else is out there from 9 to 11 multiple nights a week? You're a little different in the best way possible.
Yeah, and a lot of kind of I've been noticing a lot of people with international connections and ties. How does that internationalism play the part?
I think partially that's from the university itself. So like Ernst himself was getting a PhD here. That's why he was here. Valerie, that other person, was from Chile. That woman Anya was originally from Spain. We've just always been welcoming, and I think like it's the same idea where I can say, I really actually, I'm not glad they say this too. We have a volunteer who's really awesome named Kadrick, and Kadrick did a panel for the LGBTQI Research Center at Davis, and someone asked a question, what do you do to promote trans people to come to the night market? And he said, nothing, we just treat people well. So I say the same thing often with international people, like if you treat people well, you will get a diverse group of people, often people on the fringes.
Okay. And then, the sort of, I guess, on the, not necessarily the fringe, but you talked a little bit about safety. I know that we moved on from that, but this one might be a little bit touchy.
No, you go for it.
What's the market's relationship with like Davis law enforcement?
Wonderful question. Historically, they've come very infrequently. So it's like in that one situation I brought up with the person who was assaulted, the two people who were assaulted called the police and they came. Luckily, I had a community member call me because I wanted to come there right away to talk to law enforcement, because you could potentially make your situation much worse if you say the wrong thing. I'm like, I will be there, I'll talk to them. Completely understandable. I was like, if you punch a 65-year-old woman and someone wants to call the cops, I'm not going to stop them. And I can say we often, sadly, and I've had this happen if we have an issue, have had times where they will not show up. They'll say you're in a public park, or they'll say they're not committing a crime, we can't do anything. We have a volunteer who will remain nameless, whose husband works for the fire department. And she's like, if you ever have a problem, let me know. I'll send my husband there, and he'll make sure it's taken care of. So that's why I say these connections are everything.
Okay.
And I'll go further. We had in January, is often what will happen is even if it ends at 11, sometimes people just want to hang out. Like me and a couple of people were hanging out till about 12. We were right about to leave. And a police car drives up to right where we are and tries to shine his light and be like, you guys have to leave now, and just was kind of being an asshole. So my response to him was, show me the ordinance that says this. And he kind of fluttered a little bit. We were going to leave anyway. But it's like if he had come there earlier, I wouldn't have left without seeing an official document saying we cannot be here.
No.
And I think after that, we never had another problem, which I think that was part of the reason. They knew they couldn't push us around.
Okay.
Or actually, I can give you a bit more if you wanted this too.
Are you able to go?
I can go a little later.
A little bit later than that? Or, yeah. Okay. Or earlier, technically.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So I don't know if you were aware when the stabbings had happened.
Yes, I do remember that. Yeah.
So 2 of the people involved had come to night market. One came a lot. So David Bro, the compassion guy, came all the time. So the day after he was stabbed, police came up to do an investigation. I was comfortable talking to him, but there's the question, like, do you talk to them about an investigation like this? Like, I don't see it as an individual. Like, I'll talk to him as an individual, and that's all right with me. Because it also potentially affected us, because he was stabbed probably within 100 yards of where we have the market. And originally I'd heard it was 11. I'm like, shit, if that was at 11:20 p.m., we're going to be a major part of this investigation. It was they found 11:20 a.m., which didn't make me happy, but made our lives different.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah. In the sense of like, we will work with them. If needed, we will call, but we often, because we've been told, where it's pretty specific with us, unless someone is actively committing a crime, police will not do anything. So like if someone is just kind of being an asshole, you can't call and say, absolutely, if you're in a public park.
Okay. I guess kind of returning to the scripted questions.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. That's great. Thank you for sticking with me.
No, go for it.
So just from your experience, what are the characteristics of a good community organization?
So I would say the ability to criticize and push back. I think like for me, it's like even now, it's like there's certain things I'm like, you can push back. I'm going to disagree with you and I'm going to stick with this, but I hear your criticisms. And often I would say people who aren't okay with someone pushing back can't really accomplish things within night market, because I use the example of it's essentially a giant oil tanker and you can't oversteer it. If you try to oversteer it, it's going to crash. But whenever people have tried to create like new methodologies, new protocols without really trying to get consensus first, and they're trying to just push them, they never stick. And that's a big part of it, is just trying to work with people, lower people's burden. So for example, we try to think about lighting, and there was a person who really wanted to focus on lighting, but more at an abstract level, not being like, okay, what's going to make people's lives easy? It's like, unless you're focusing on what's going to make people's lives easy, you're not going to have as strong an organization. And then trying to show a lot of gratitude. Like I'll constantly text volunteers being like, thank you so much, I appreciate what you're doing. It makes a big difference. And giving them the ability to have a say. So for example, there's a volunteer named Alex who's only been with us now for about 6 months, who is leading a lot of the sexual harassment policy within night market. Whereas like, no, you have every right to do that. You have said that you had an issue. You've had issues, not in a bad way here, but other places too, and that this is something you care about. Go around with it. We'll support you.
There we go. And then, I guess the last question here is, what advice do you have for other people who might be trying to do something similar in their communities?
Start small. That's first. If you can find someone with knowledge who's willing to help you out, go there. I can give an example of like, especially for night market, we've had many people talk over our times about expansions. And there's been a lot of talk. There actually was a class in Cal Poly Pomona that did a whole really wonderful presentation about how to start a night market.
Wow.
Nothing ever came from it. They wrote this wonderful presentation, and I can see it, and I'm like, I'm very impressed. The follow through was hard. So the only time we've had someone who's been able to go forward is we had NorCal Resist. After we talked to them, like, you guys can do this. This is how this can work. They're like, okay, and they're not doing exactly what we're doing, but they're being inspired by us. So it's like, figure out something that works for your own community. If you have a larger org that's willing to help out, do it through that larger org, and then treat people really well. You do all those things, you'll probably be successful. Because there's a ton of work to do here, and there's plenty of people that would like to do it, but you have to make it. Actually, the law says tailor to your community. So like, what can work in Davis may not work in Sacramento, it might not work in San Francisco, it may not work in Oakland. You have to look like, okay, what does the community there want? And if you focus on what the community there wants and what the volunteers that are part of it need to feel fulfilled, you'll be very successful.
Okay. Well, I think that is everything that I've got here. Is there anything that you wanted to bring up that we didn't really talk about?
Yeah, no, we went into, especially like your questions you asked were fantastic, and I know it may have gone in a slightly different order, but you went to the important ones. Yeah, and I think now you see it's like for the restaurant and grocery store, the issue is bigger than that with the trust.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Do you have anything off or anything else, or do you feel good?
No, I was jotting down questions as we went, so we covered everything. I'm gonna call this interview done.
Oh, and then the one thing is, whenever you're finished, could you send us the interview?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.